Hello, everyone, and welcome to another virtual event here at Mysterious Galaxy. My name is Nick. I am a bookseller and the digital marketer here for the bookstore. Tonight, we have a great event. We are joined with Shea Ernshaw and conversation partner Erika Swyler. Hello. Shea is a New York Times bestselling author and winner of the Oregon Book Award. Her books have been published in over 12 countries and many languages, and her novels, The Wicked Deep and Winterwood, were indie next picks. Erika is the best-selling author of the critically acclaimed novels Life from Other Stars and The Book of Speculation. But tonight, we are here to discuss Shea's latest novel. Oh, ready on hand with that? There we go.
You're flipped.
I am flipped. I don't know why. A History of Wild Places. Ooh, yes, and it looks very cool on the inside cover. Travis Wren has an unusual talent for locating missing people. Hired by families as a last resort, he requires only a single object to find the person who has vanished. When he takes on the case of Maggie St. James, a well-known author of dark, macabre children's books, he's led to a place many believe to be only a legend. Hauntingly beautiful, hypnotic, and bewitching, A History of Wild Places is a story that fairy tales are fear of the dark and losing yourself within the wilderness of your mind. Chilling, I love it. I can't wait. All right, for anyone who hasn't yet done it, if you click the link below that says buy books, you will get a signed book plate by Shea herself. Any of her books, you get a signed book plate. And if you have any questions, which look like some of you have already found the button, you hit ask a question and submit your questions. Tiffany, hello. Hello, Leon. I don't know how to pronounce that. Chris, hello. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and dance off screen and let these two wonderful authors take over.
Yay, thank you.
Yay! Thank you so much. Thank you, Mysterious Galaxy. Thank you, Shea, for letting me talk to you. I read this book, and I want to say about 2 chapters in, I knew I had to meet you, if that makes any sense. I said, who is writing this? This woman is incredible. What is going on here?
Oh.
I love this book so much, and it's very difficult to talk about without spoiling, which is kind of the best thing about it in some ways. It's a really, really tightly packed mystery, thriller, psychological horror, folklore. I don't want to say genre bending because genre encompasses everything. Just incredibly, as I think I said, a wonderful rabbit hole to fall down. And it really is. It's quite a rabbit hole. So I want to congratulate you on this book and just, be a little in awe of you for a second. I also,
well, that's very sweet of you.
Oh, thank you. There is so much to talk to you about this book. I want to start off a little bit with, this book has a really interesting setting in the Pacific Northwest, where I understand you're from, and it's very, very woods-based. And I was reading in an interview that you're sort of drawing heavily from where you live and from that place. And I want to, and that you start writing from place. And I wanted to know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit. Like, what's the start of your writing process? What generates these sorts of things for you?
Yeah, I love setting. I think anyone who's read any of my books knows that is where my passion lies. I could easily write an entire book just on setting without any characters. I always joke that no one would read that book, but I would enjoy writing it. So yeah, my books often start with setting. I have an idea of the place, the atmosphere, what is the weather like, and then I really build the story around that. My characters start to populate that setting. The story and the plot sort of take root once I have that sense of setting. But that's really what I think inspires me. Where I feel the most creative is when I'm describing setting. I mean, I could describe the way the wind blows through the trees for a whole chapter. But that is what I really love. And so everything else sort of comes secondary to that for me. But I feel like that's also true of your books. Having read both of yours now, like that seems to be where your stories really take place too. But I guess I'm curious if that is true for you. Does setting come for you first, or is that really secondary?
Yeah, I think setting for me is sort of secondary. I get a character voice first, and then I have to know where in the world that person fits. So that voice then drives setting, which then kind of drives the novel. But
Right.
I think you were talking a lot about, well, I guess you have to figure out who's gonna be in this little town, or who's gonna be in this little place. And then once you have that solid, plot just kind of seems to grow. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this interesting small town that you've built. Again, I've done a little reading up on you today. For those who don't know a little bit about this this town, it is called Pastoral, and it sounds like it was loosely based on something that you sort of grew up around. Specifically a cult. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I actually grew up not far from a little town called Antelope, Oregon, which is where the commune or the community called Rajneeshpuram was first established. Oh, hold on. My computer's telling me I need to update my computer. Not now, computer. Okay, there.
Absolutely not.
It just filled up my whole screen. Like, now's a great time. So I grew up not far from this really small community. And Rajneeshpuram community was featured in the Netflix documentary called Wild Wild Country. For anyone who's seen it or is interested in learning more about it, it's a really great, really fascinating documentary. So having grown up not far from this commune / cult, depending on who you ask, it was really part of like daily conversation in our town. Our community was in the news a lot. It was in the paper. And I've told this story a couple times, but I still remember when my dad actually saw a fleet of Rolls Royces being driven out to this community for the leader of the community. And I was really fascinated with that because obviously there's a really serious juxtaposition there. You have this community trying to live off the land, and yet they have some of these really extravagant luxuries. And that really sparked my fascination with communes and communities like this. And so I always knew I really wanted to write a book set in my own fictional community. And the community of Pastoral is really, it's based on an actual real life community that is like deep in the woods of Northern California. I won't say the name of it because these poor people, I think, really
don't need that.
So I will, I'm going to refrain from talking about it. And there's a really old documentary on this real life community that the documentary was made in the 1970s. And when I was writing A History of Wild Places, I went and watched this documentary about this real life community that does still exist. And took a lot of just sort of like the setting and some of the interactions among the people from this real life community. So I based it on, again, some of my childhood experiences, some of these other real life communities. And then, the rest I just made up, which is really the joy of fiction writing, that you can really have anything you want happen. And, I took some pretty big liberties in this book in terms of that.
That's that's the joy of fiction, that, it's, you have free license to lie wildly so that it's enjoyable. And
yes.
I guess, so how long?
Fiction writers are liars inherently. I mean, that is what we do. Like, do not trust anything.
Any of us. No, books. We're terrible. But we mean well. We mean very well. So how long a process was this for you? If you've had this kind of, this fascination floating around for years.
Yeah, I had, I think I had a general premise of what the storyline might be for, decades. But I started writing this book back in 2017. I had actually just finished writing The Wicked Deep, which was my debut young adult fiction novel. And then I started drafting. Oh, did my side freeze?
Nope. You're still good.
Okay. All right. I'm frozen to my computer, but
keep going.
Okay,
you're fine.
So, okay, good. So I started drafting A History of Wild Places right after I finished writing The Wicked Deep. And so I probably wrote the first draft in about 6 months. and then had to put it aside because I was then revising other books that I was working on and didn't get to work on History of Wild Places for a while until I think the end of 2019. I finally went back in and then revised it, polished it up, got it ready to go. And then, now it's in the world.
So this is your first, I hate the delineation, but there is one. This is your first adult novel, so to speak.
Right.
And what does that difference mean for you? I sort of see, especially coming with, from a YA audience, this is like inviting people to just read more widely. Widely, same thing. But but I think, the process of who an audience is does affect your writing. So how was it different for you? Does it feel more constraining or more open? Anything like that?
It didn't feel very different, actually. I think there's not a lot of separation, and the only real difference is that your characters are a different age. And I've told this story before too, but I think when I first sat down to write History of Wild Places, I wasn't noticing any difference in the writing process until I came to a place where one of my adult characters needed to sneak out of the house or leave the house in the middle of the night. And I suddenly realized I didn't have to come up with an excuse for them to leave. Right. They didn't have to sneak out and have their parents not find out. They didn't have school the next morning that they were going to somehow miss if they didn't make it back home in time. I realized there that there were some freedoms that my characters had. So that was really liberating. But aside from that, it's the same, 3-act structure. There's some of the same components that take place in a book. So I really didn't notice much difference in terms of that, other than my characters being able to do what they want. They can go solve a mystery and, not have a math quiz the next morning.
It's a different kind of oversight too. I mean, you still, in some ways, you still have sort of a parental figure in this, I want to say, in the character of, I read him that way, not necessarily a good parental figure, but in the character of Levi. I say Levi, it might be Levi, not sure which do you prefer?
Either's fine with me,
Okay, so I'm going to say Levi. In the character of Levi, he is sort of an overseer in a lot of ways. So do you want to talk about him a little bit? I found him fascinating, endlessly fascinating. And I think your readers are going to have a ton of opinions and you're going to get a lot of emails. Good emails.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He really is sort of like the overseer of the community. He's really the leader of the community, for good or bad. And he was a really interesting character to write in the exploration of, does leadership and power corrupt? And
I have marked a line that you have written. I did my research here because it is from a chapter, and it is about Levi, and it is saying, I have often wondered if power does this to a man, unravels him slowly over time, doubt itching beneath his flesh until it's all that's left. And this is what I love so much about the book. The language is rich and the ideas are they're forceful and beautiful. And so this is why I was trying to get you to Levi, because this line just killed me. So.
But yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. That line really sums it up. Is he inherently doomed to be corrupt? Does the need to control other people overwhelm even the most honest of people?
Right.
And I want readers to be somewhat sympathetic to him, because I don't think he started out the way he ended up. Clearly he went down a dark, twisted path. And the relationship, without giving anything away, but the relationship he has with Bee in the book, I want readers to feel like they can understand why she maybe stays with him when she shouldn't. There are also some underlying reasons of why she does, and maybe she would have made a better decision early on if it weren't for some other things that are taking place that she's not aware of. Again, without giving anything away.
Yeah, it's so hard to talk about this book without spoiling it.
I know. Yeah, we
That's a
probably
good
sound
book.
really vague and annoying that we're not, just talking about it. But I think their relationship started out much more honest and good. And I think they had a foundation of like a true, real relationship. And then I wonder if things would have been different if he hadn't become the leader of the community.
Absolutely.
Would their relationship have actually been a healthy one if he hadn't taken on this role, and that role, not just of leadership, but the responsibility he felt to take care of the people in the community. And I think that's what ultimately stems or prompts what happens and why he behaves the way he does, because he's trying to protect everyone. And that sort of creates this corruption and deceit and lies that take place without giving anything away.
Sort of interesting to read now in what we're affectionately calling the plague years.
Yeah.
I do want to actually talk about that a little bit. So I think without giving too much away, there is a specific reason why people are staying within this community. And there's sort of a mythology built around why they should stay in this community and not leave. But it's also kind of butting up against this fantasy idea we all have, or especially during this weird time of, God, if I could just run away into the woods and get away from this. So what is the, and clearly you were working, for the way publishing works, for those not in the know, you're working on stuff, you're still touching the book up until about 6 months before publication. And so there's no way you weren't in lockdown and looking at some of these pages and thinking, oh my gosh. So how was that, writing this kind of insular community and this reason they can't leave while all this is going down in the world?
Yeah, I think if I had known in 2017 that I was writing this book about an isolated community, and also, there is this disease that they also fear within the community. If I had known what I was writing then and that this book would be released in 2021, I might not have wanted to do that. I might have, second guessed myself. But yeah, you're right. As in 2020, as I was doing some of those final last passes in the book, there's some certain scenes and certain moments that I just caught myself, went, oof, man, like I'm really sort of like honing in on the real world right now, which felt very timely, but also terrifying. I think I maybe would have not written this book if I hadn't written it when I did, because it is very symbolic of what's going on right now.
It's funny. I think while we were locked down is, I think, when I actually got a hold of early copies, and I read it and I thought, oh no, is this going to be, oh no, this is perfect for right now. Because there was this kind of, though this is a very dark and moody and atmospheric book, it's very cozy in a way. I think because the characters are we're just sitting on characters' shoulders, and it feels very intimate and comforting that way. We have real psychological insights. And so I think that's, that made this book hum for me. Speaking of psychological insights, I want to ask you about a lot of the research that you had to do for this book. And again, hard not to talk about without giving it away. There is a list of books towards the end of this book, and I didn't look up as to whether they exist or not. But I want to know the type of psychological reading that you did for this book.
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. I think there's maybe one or two of those books that you're referencing that were real. The other ones were fabricated books. Yes. This is really tough to talk about. I was going to tell you a story about an encounter I had. I can't talk about it though. Unless everyone here has read the book, but I don't want to make the assumption that everyone has.
Okay, so then I will go elsewhere. First chapter of the book.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about Travis. Travis is what I would, very cheesily call a psychic detective, but not really. So, how
he's
did you?
A washed up psychic.
Yeah, he's like, and he's so. It's very human and humbling. He feels so broken when we open this book, and I just. oof, I feel for him. And I very rarely feel for TV psychic detective sort of situations. Are the only ones I've seen. So like this was quite a good thing. So how did you come up with what he does, and how does that work for you? Like, you know, was there law to it? How did you make that up?
Right. Because what you're saying rings true for me too. You know, I didn't want him to feel like the typical psychic that you hire and he gets his sixth sense about what's happening. Like, I wanted him to be resistant to his ability. I mean, he's sort of like, oh, here's this. It's more of a burden on him. And at the point in which we sort of step into his world in the book, he's really trying to escape not just, you know, his abilities and his career, but his whole entire life. And so he's not like fully embracing what it is that he does. He sort of reluctantly takes this case to try to find Maggie. And so writing him, it was a really fun experience. And if you've read far enough into the book, you'll know it's like we're with him for a good chunk in the beginning, and then we're suddenly not. And it was really hard to leave him behind in the story for a time. Because he really was such a great character. I mean, I can so visually see him, you know, just what he looks like. He's been on the road for a really long time. So developing his character was a fun experience. And I really developed him as I was drafting and as I was writing. I didn't know much about him beforehand, you know, even though I'm a really avid outliner. I just knew generally sort of like what he looked like and what some of his abilities were, but the story of who he was and his background really sort of unfolded as I was writing it. In those first few scenes, it just sort of unfolded.
So yeah, about that with your process, because this is such an intricate book, did you know beforehand? I don't want to say the trick because it's not really a trick of the book. It's the plot. Okay. It's not like a twist. It's what it is. So did you know beforehand? Did you know when you started out what happened to Maggie St. James and Travis, and why Travis suddenly goes away? And I have to say, the moment he went away, I woke up. I said, oh, because I was in and in love with him. And then I went, oh, wait. Oh, right. Wait,
where's he going? What's happening here?
I'm not going to get him back. So it felt very bold. So
I was going to say, which felt really risky, you know, when I did that, I thought this is a really bad move, because I mean, you know, in terms of storytelling, you you do your introduction for your character, you get the reader invested in them, and then you get to carry this character on throughout the story, and then, you know, you get to see them have their full character arc. So I built up this character. I gave you all the meat and bones and potatoes of this guy, and then I went, we're done.
I love that. And I saw that and I said, like, that is a bold writer, and I love it, because those things that when you're writing them and you go, this is the worst idea, this is so bad, winds up being the thing that like joins the book and makes it happen. I feel like, that pull is such a strong move.
Oh gosh, yeah. It was scary. I still feel scared when I think about it. I can recall that anxiety. I felt like this is a terrible idea. I mean, I'm breaking all the rules of storytelling that we know as writers, that you're supposed to follow some of these general guidelines. And I just sort of broke that in half and went, well, we're going this direction now. So yeah, that was hard to do. But you know, your question of, did I know like where things were going? I did. I knew where they were going. I did second guess myself a couple times, you know, as I was writing it. And when like you said, there's the twist, but it really is just the plot. It's really it's
not a twist. It's the plot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when I got to the point where I'm revealing some of those things, I did start to think like, is this the right direction? You know, like, should I always knew that's where I was going, but I mean, you come to those points, and then, especially because they're big moments in the story. And as a writer, if you know you're working up to that place, and then once you get there, it's like you've reached the mountaintop and you're like, am I doing this right? Because there's so much build up to it. So I had a couple other plan B and C's of what I could do. I didn't want to go that direction. So those were always in my head, which I can't share with you because I think it would also give it away.
Right.
but I knew some of the other places I could go. And one of the directions generally was I could go more down this like fairy tale route, or I could go more down the magical route or the fantasy route. But I really wanted to root the whole story in the real world. And I wanted the reader to question that. Like, is this a fantasy book? Like, is there real magic and mystery and weird things happening here? Or is this really actually rooted in the real world and it's not what we think it is? So I knew I could go either one of those directions, but I was really pulled to just having the story be grounded in real world setting, and that these things could really happen in the real world.
I really loved that. I think if it had, and I'm always a proponent of fantasy and fairy tale and folklore, which do play a role in this, but in this case, it was such the bolder move, I think, to keep it grounded, and it tipped it into this realm of psychological horror that was delicious. So good move. I'm just going to keep praising you.
In some ways it's more, well, thank you. In some ways it's more terrifying because it is grounded in the real world. If you create a fantasy story, I can conjure up all kinds of monsters and evil conjurings, but sometimes those are so fantastical that they're less scary. But when you root it in the real world and you place it in a setting where these things could really happen, that's almost more terrifying, I think. And so in the way the story unfolds, it's like, this is really scary that this happened to these people the way that it did.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about how you write tension. And 1 second, just want to remind everybody, you can drop questions in the ask a question, because I'm sure you have a million questions for Shea, and I could talk her ear off, but it's better if you do. So I want to talk a little bit about tension and how you keep it, you build it across this novel so beautifully. And that's something that I think so many writers and often readers struggle with. Like, why is this dragging so long? Wait, what just happened? This was too fast. But this was a really, really steady build. So how do you work on that?
I can get caught up in the same slow trappings as anyone else, because again, I can just describe setting for pages. And so I have to be really careful there that I reel that back in. But a rule of thumb I often have is, somebody said this, was it Patterson? There was another author who said this quote before, but that you should write your book the way you would verbally tell a story to someone. So if you were sitting around a campfire and you were telling them the story of what happened, you wouldn't drag it out and describe to them, the way the rain was hitting the roof and, the smells in the air. Like, you would move it along pretty quickly. You would get to those big climax points. You would tell the story pretty rapidly. And so I try to remember that when I'm writing, and even when I'm like nearing the end of a chapter, it's like, okay, wrap this thing up, and you have to keep the tension going, because it really is, you're telling a story to somebody, but in book form. And I think, to create that tension, you have to always have that woven into every scene, even the most, seemingly subdued scenes. There should be that layer of tension in there that sort of keeps the reader thinking something's not right here, something's happening. And I love writing that stuff. I love a dark, eerie story that has this sense of, I want readers to always be questioning, like, what is happening? Where are we going with this? I want to confuse you so that I can ultimately say, here's what's really happening.
I would describe this, all right, the feeling of reading this book, which is the least spoilery way I can say it, is being snowed in a cabin and there's a loud noise outside and you don't know what it is. It's that kind of, and I really love that. So I'm going to
I hope, like you said early on, I hope there's still that cozy element, because I love that too. I want you to feel like you're also sort of at home beside the fire, drinking a cup of tea, but reading a horror story. Like, I want to mesh those two things together.
There's a fireplace in that cabin. It's very cozy.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm going to turn to some questions for a minute here. Let's see. Okay. So this is from Holly. Holly wants to know what your favorite part of writing the story was and who your favorite character is.
Ooh, my favorite character is B. B is just the most magical, underrated character, I think, in the book. She doesn't get a lot of screen time or page time. Her chapters are often a little bit shorter than all the others, and yet I really just love her. And I think she's also the catalyst for a lot of what happens in the story and for unraveling what's really going on. So she's really like the linchpin in the whole story.
Mhm.
And I just think she's such a brilliant character. And my favorite scene is, I can't really say other than
So
it's the scene where someone gets killed and murdered and really deserves it.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. There's comeuppance in this, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah,
Let's see.
that vindication just was such a
was
great
so
scene
good.
to write.
So this is from Lena Marsteller. I hope I'm saying your name right. You can yell at me in the comments if I'm not. Any advice for writing multiple points of view? Do you write each point of view separately and then move things around? Yeah. How do you, everyone does it different. So you did this well. So
My advice, don't do it. Back out slowly now. Avoid it if you can. Yeah, it was challenging. I wrote them in sequence with the book. So I didn't like sit down and write all of B's scenes or write all of Theo's scenes. I wrote it in sequence as the story was moving along. It's hard. It is really tricky. I wish I had a good, tip. Other than I'm really promising myself I will never do it again because it is really hard. You have to, because I'm such an avid outliner, I had to really outline each point of view's character. So I knew what each character, not only like their plot line, but what they knew about the greater story, because each character is unraveling things at a different pace. And so I didn't always know, like, does this character know something the other one doesn't? And trying to keep that all straight it's a web, it's a mess. I would just say outline as much as you can, take notes, and just save yourself the agony and don't do it to yourself.
it is a huge pain in the butt, and you're clearly more structured about it than I am. I wind up like at the end, I'm like, I'll just shuffle these chapters. We'll see what happens. So
yeah,
yours is more efficient and it makes more sense. It's fine.
Yeah, they go back together anywhere you want, right? You can just pull chapters out and just shove them
back in.
It's
fine. Linear plot. Who cares? So Brittany wants to
editors
know
love it when you do that.
Exactly. Oh gosh, your poor editor. Who's in the chat? Hi.
I know. Hi, Lone. We apologize.
So Brittany Schmidt wants to know what your inspiration for this story was.
Well, again, it really was a story I had been sort of loosely thinking about for many years. So I'd slowly been sort of adding to my outline. As I got ideas for the plot or different characters, I'd sort of throw them into just a big Word doc, but it was really messy. And then again, for me, I didn't even sit down to really work on it until I figured out where my setting was and where the story would take place. And once I knew it was going to take place in Northern California, I had my setting, I had my map where I could place my characters. And then that's really where it started to take hold for me.
Oh, that dovetails so well into this question. Thank you, Mysterious Galaxy. Because Pastoral is based off a real group, did you at any point of writing the book think to yourself, should I be writing about this?
Yeah, I mean, of course. Yeah. And I think I maybe even the real community where I base that's in Northern California that still exists today, they do have like a very old website that was built in the 1980s and just is sitting there, and you can send them an email. And I think early on, I sent them an email to try to reach out to them. Never heard anything back. They probably don't even check it. I mean, I would be surprised if they did. But, it would have been great to actually go visit. Was sort of my hope that I could actually go visit this community, spend some time there, get sucked in and never leave. And then you'll never hear from me again, just like Maggie.
I was going to say. Yeah, I would love to research that, but also no, I would be completely sucked in and someone would discover me 60 years later of farming carrots. It would be fine.
Yeah. What happened to Erica? She had to do like 5 years ago.
She got really into turnips. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and I don't know about you, but I also feel like if I go to the real place where I want to base a book, it almost ruins it for me. It's better to have a vague idea in your mind as a writer of what you think it is, because I've visited locations and then been like, ooh, no, that's not right at all.
Yeah.
And I found it's better for me to interpret it than to actually go and see it in real life. I find it's better to go after the fact, like after the book's out, then you go visit it and you go, okay, that was pretty close. But otherwise it's like meeting your heroes. Like, don't ruin it in that way.
Yeah, I get that. I just feel like when I do something, I wind up going, I'll write a draft and know that I'm missing a huge chunk of what the place is. And then I'll go and figure out kind of what I've gotten wrong and then what I want to do with it. So I feel like some license over inventing things, but like I wind up
it's
spending
why we
a
write
bunch of
fiction.
right? Like I got to spend a bunch of time in Titusville for a book, and just because I was basing something very loosely off Titusville, but to actually write about Titusville, Florida would have been no. That's too touchy. But you want to get the idea so that you have enough room to play with it. Oh, we have a question from Marley. Hi, Marley. Marley would like to know who are your influences? Like what authors and novels? Who's inspired you?
Oh, well, I mean, many of you who are on here probably already know this, but Alice Hoffman is one of the biggest influences for me. Practical Magic, when I first read that, just changed the whole way that I see storytelling. And obviously, she's a very poetic, beautifully articulate, but the way she describes like setting and her world building is just so unbelievable. And then after I read that book, I just started devouring everything of hers. And one of my favorites is a book that you don't see that often, but it's called Blackbird House. And it's about a house, and then it just covers these generations of people who live there. And if I remember right, it might even be written from the point of view of the house. But it's just
that's
beautiful.
perfect.
It's a very short book, but it's just lovely. But everything she does, I think, is just unbelievable. Oh, good. They've posted there. You can find Alice Hoffman's books. Yay.
Excellent. We have multiple people who want to know what is next for you. What are you working on? So that is Damien and Lee. Hi, Damien. Hi, Lee.
Yay. Hi. What am I working on? What you really are asking is why I don't sleep anymore.
Exactly.
Why I have back-to-back
busy.
deadlines. So my next book will be coming out in July of 2022, and it's called Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. And it is a sequel to the Nightmare Before Christmas movie. So that will be coming out with Disney. And that book is done, written, copy edits are done. So it's, we're just doing the tiny finishing touches on that book now. So that should be really fun. And then I have another book coming out in November of 2022 called A Wilderness of Stars. And it's about a girl who is an astronomer. And I haven't figured out how to say much more about that book without giving anything away. So I'm going to have to think on that one. But
that's very much my jam. That is, oof. That's exciting.
Yeah, we're on the same page on that one for sure. And then I'm drafting another book right now that hasn't been announced yet. I can't say much other than I know fans of my first two books are going to be very happy. I'll just say that.
Excellent. And we have Malvika here who wants to, she says she loves, I'm assuming this is, okay. Malvika loves how atmospheric your books are and wants to know if you have any favorite books with a similar feeling that you'd recommend. Book rec time. Ooh. What are you reading that you recommend that has atmospheric feel?
Oh gosh, what am I reading with atmospheric feel? I don't know if I've read anything recently with that, like with specifically an atmospheric. I just read The Need by someone
Helen Phillips.
Thank you.
Helen Phillips. Yep. Yeah.
Did you read that?
No, I know of it. I was like, that came out the year I was like touring, and it's in my TBR, my never-ending book pile.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That book is just unbelievable. I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever read before, so I highly recommend it. It's just bizarre and interesting. It's about a woman who works at like an archaeological dig site and begins unearthing objects that really don't belong. And those objects begin sort of like affecting her life, but in ways that are very unexpected. It's a really, really interesting book. And then this book, this is not an atmospheric book, but I just started reading this, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. I don't know if you can see it. I can't see myself on the screen anymore because it froze a long time ago, but this book is a wonder. I can't recommend it enough. It's just so beautiful. And it's a dictionary of new words, basically. And it's really beautiful. So recommend that one.
That's amazing. Let's see. Marley would like to know if you ever get nervous sharing your work with the world. She wishes she could write fiction, but it seems so daunting. Yes, it's daunting.
Yes, you are not alone. Yeah, I think that's the hardest part. I mean, I don't know about you, Erika, but the act of writing is just my favorite part. You know, making the art is, I think, where, you know, we feel most at home, we feel most comfortable. And then when you have to go like show it to the world, that's terrifying, of course.
It's horribly embarrassing somehow. I don't know why. For me, it feels sort of like, here's my ugly little thing. I love it and know that no one else will, but here it is. But, you know, it ends up not being like that when it's out in the world. But
yeah, at a certain point, you have to let it go. Like you've created this whole living, breathing thing, I think, and you have to just send it out in the world and it's going to go do whatever it's going to do. It's really sort of on its own at that point. And we have to let it go and release it and say, it's not mine anymore. It's yours. It belongs to you guys. It belongs to the readers. But yeah, it's scary. I mean, it's every time it's scary. And I know a lot of authors who will post quotes from their book, like on their social media. And yeah, I can't do it either, even though I know ultimately they will read the entire book. I mean, there's no escaping that part, but just sharing little clips, snippets, you know, a paragraph here is just horrifying for me.
It feels like this weird little act of pride that you're not allowed to have for some reason. I'm like, you can't admit that this thing is good, even though it is. Like, it's really good, but it's hard to just, you know, dive into that. So I get that. And yes, it is deeply daunting, but you can do it. Just, you know, it's all about that process and staying on the page, and whatever happens after, it's not yours. Let's see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do you, Erika, like just quickly, do you have like any great writing advice? Do you have like the one tip or the one thing that you always share to aspiring writers? Do you have something?
Oh gosh. This is kind of silly, but it's literally don't follow anyone else's process, because it's not yours. You know, you can try out someone else's process. They might write every day. They might write just on the weekends. They might outline a whole bunch. Maybe they don't outline at all. Try all of those different things until you find what feels good to sit down and make words. And that's really it. I mean, I've tried a lot to be an outliner and I fail miserably. I've tried a lot to be a write every day, and that makes me miserable. So it's one of those, you know, it's taken a long time of trial and error to figure out what works for me. And I think that's the only solid piece of like being a working writer that's ever worked for me. Find your own process, try everybody else's, but find your own. So how about you?
Yep. 100%. I mean, I agree with that. If you try to mimic anybody else, I mean, it's just, it doesn't work. I've done that before. I've tried to mimic exactly what someone else's process is, and it never works. You have to figure out what works for you. But the advice I always give people is to write a bad book first, because everyone can do that. Like, just write a really terrible, awful book, just get it on the page, because I think there's also something to be learned by getting to the end. You know, once you reach the end and you write that ending, you see not just your plot arc, but your character arc. You can kind of look back over the entirety of your story and say, well, here's what worked and here's what didn't. But I think you gain knowledge by getting to the very end. And so just write a really terrible, awful book. You can go back and revise it. You can't revise a blank page, or you can scrap the whole thing. That's great too, because you've learned something along the way. I mean, I think too, the notion of like a debut author is really misleading for people. You think that your debut book is like the first book that person wrote, which is not true. I mean, I don't know about you. I think I wrote 5 books before I got an agent. And then I wrote 3 more books before I got published with my first book. So I've written some books, you guys, that are now just buried in a closet. No one will ever see them. But man, I learned so much in that process. I wouldn't change any of it.
Exactly. I've got a book that is under a pen name that no one will ever know and no one will ever read. And thank God, but it needed to happen in order so that I know, oh, I can finish a thing, which feels very hard when you're, staring at that first blank page. Emily would like to know, was your writing process for this book different than for your previous novels?
It was only because my outlining process has just become more detailed with each book I write. Because again, I learn more about my process with each book. I understand like where my big hangups are, the things I'm not good at. I have to make more detailed notes for myself to make sure I can go back and like catch those things. So I think I've gotten better at recognizing my flaws. And so then hopefully for future books, I can fix those earlier and again, save my editor from having to do it for me. So I think my writing process just gets more detailed. It gets more structured. My outlines just get longer and more ridiculous. I mean, it's absurd, my outlining process. So
I want to see
that stuff just gets, I know, I will share them with you. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's a Word doc with, chapter by chapter outlines. And then I have a whiteboard where I outline the 3-act structure on that as well. So all of those 3 things together, form this master outline. And then I sit down and draft. Easy as that.
I love that. I love that. I've never heard anyone say Excel before, and that makes me so happy. I feel like Excel is just this maligned program. It does amazing things. And if you use it for outlining, that's the best. So let's see. We've got one more, I think. This is are any of your novels being adapted for TV? Brittany would like to know this.
Ooh, so
the film and TV world.
I know.
It's weird.
So, how much can I say?
It's so difficult.
I know. I'm so sorry. I wish I could just tell everybody everything. I really hate keeping secrets, so it's hard. So the Wicked Deep sold to Netflix early on when that book first came out. Without giving anything away, there's been some changes along the way. And there is momentum happening. I think I can say that. But beyond that, I can't say anything.
For everyone in the chat, Hollywood moves very slowly. Like if you think publishing moves slowly, and publishing moves slowly, so that insider talk here, it can take usually around 18 months from when you hear the notice of I sold a book to when it's actually on shelves, 18 months to 2 years sometimes. And Hollywood is slower than that. And things get punted around a lot. So when you hear a sudden like, oh my God, everyone's interested in this book again, that book has been in development for like 6 years. So it's, and we as authors are not allowed to talk about it at all until someone decides to make a large PR stink to like, drum up interest. So it takes a very, very long time. But I want to know. I want to know all of these things.
I know.
So, but do you have any like last minute, like book recommendations, things you'd love to tell people to read? Or, before that, the one thing, since this is your last, event with this tour. What is the one question that you wanted to answer that no one has asked you yet?
Oh gosh, that's hard because I've been asked so many questions.
So many,
I'm not sure if there's like anything that's been left that I haven't had to talk about. No, I mean, I feel like on this chat too, we really got into some of the deeper stuff with the story, which was really fun. I think we walked the line really well because we came close to giving things away, but didn't.
Yes.
So I think we did pretty good. Ooh, I know what I do want to share. So in your debut book, is this on camera? You have to tell me because
it's on camera.
So, okay. So I pulled this off the shelf tonight to see what edition I have. So it is the hardback. I do have a first edition, which I was so excited about. So I got this book ages ago, but here's something I noticed. Book of speculation with illustrations by the author. You're going to need to explain yourself with that. So then I started flipping through.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Erika
It's
is
illustrated.
an artist.
Yep.
Nice.
Those are all my weird drawings. So I had a really strange submission process because it's because I was a debut and nobody knew me. I had no connections. It was like a Jane Austen novel, no connections. I wanted to do a really interesting submission package. So my agent asked if I knew how to, like, could we submit this as a book? So I learned how to bind books. I taught myself how to bind books, and I hand bound 16 copies, and I started making illustrations so that when an editor received this book, like parts of the book of speculation would fall out and they'd have this little piece of the story in their hands. So it would be like they received the object that is in the book. So I was drawing all these things that the character in this book draws. And I didn't realize that when they purchased the book, they were purchasing my illustrations as well. And I was like, but I'm not an illustrator. And then suddenly I was. So yeah, the rest of my books so far are not illustrated, but it's nice to know that the book world is still open to interesting things and books as beautiful objects, which, by the way, this is a huge encouragement for you to buy the hardback of History of Wild Places, because it is gorgeous. And these objects are all featured within the book. There is a puzzle in the cover. And this is only for first edition hardbacks. So you will have a truly special little art object with you that no one else will have. So I definitely encourage you to pick up the hardback. And it's just nice to have, a book as a beautiful physical object too. So yeah.
I agree. And having first editions is just so special. I mean, to see that I had your first edition, I had no idea that that's what it was. And it just made me so happy that, I picked up this book in 2015. I would have had no idea then. We would be doing this event all these years later. I just
awesome.
love that.
But
yeah,
so
pretty great.
Last question from me is going to be, what else are you reading now? What books do you want to recommend? Who do you want to hype? Because you have a captive audience right here, so you can force your reading taste on them.
I wish I could say that I'm reading more right now than I am. I've been on such just crazy deadline lately that I've really not been reading that much. So I wish I had more recommendations. What are some of yours? Do you have some good ones right now?
So for folks who are into this book, I would actually recommend, it was out, I want to say early this year, A Body of Stars by Laura Maylene Walter.
Ooh.
And it is sort of, it is an alternate, very close to Earth, but not quite Earth, where women's fates are decided by the shape of birthmarks on their bodies. Basically, people can read birthmarks on women's bodies like they're tarot cards, and it predicts futures. And that is really interesting. It's a lot about gender binary and a lot about what people are capable of in a repressed society. So I'm a huge fan of that. And also, I'm going to recommend this for you. If you haven't yet read Meet Me in Another Life by Catriona Silvey, you absolutely should. It is science fiction involving time loops and two, I will call them space travelers, borderline philosophers. And they're very, very interesting. And that will be a movie. I think Gal Gadot's production company bought it and she intends to star. So it's really good. Again, Catriona Silvey, Meet Me in Another Life. And that was out again earlier this year. And coming up, and this is for sci-fi fans, this is January release. You want to read Sequoia Nagamatsu's, oh my gosh, How High We Go in the Dark. And it is...
I've heard of that one.
It's really good. It is... Again, don't be deterred because it starts off with a little bit of climate change and a little bit of plague, but it's very much about humanity and the ways that we care for each other in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. And you will cry over a small pig named Snortorius Pig. I never knew that I could laugh so hard and cry so much. It's what sci-fi is supposed to do. So I'm pushing that pretty hard. That's out in January. So those are some of my recs. And And if you don't get any of these down, I am all over Twitter. I am unavoidable. So you can hit me up and I'm happy to refer later. So, and I think.
Love that. And I see someone else recommended
Oh,
too,
yeah.
for The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue.
Oh, yes,
I have that
we've
book
got that.
again. Haven't had time to read it.
Mhm.
But yeah, another great one.
And June would like to know if you are speaking now from your home in the woods.
I am. Yeah. I think which is why my internet's so bad and my screen is frozen. But yeah, I am. But I can still hear you and you can still hear me. So that's working.
Hey, it's worked. I'm just glad we got to have this conversation. So
I know.
think-
Me too.
and we've got a guest bookseller. He's back.
I am back. What great recommendations and what a great talk without giving away a lot of the book. Excellent. I was like, oh my goodness, how are you going to do this?
Yeah, exactly. I tried really hard.
And you did great. Oh
know.
my goodness. Excellent. Everyone that tuned in, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Shea. Thank you, Erika, for doing this. Please, everyone, I think I am, I'm inverted, but you know what? Still a great book. You should order it. There we go. That's the right one. Don't forget, if you hit the buy books and get signed book plates button, you can go ahead and order any of Shea's books that we can order, and you'll get a signed book plate for it. What a great deal. With that, and I know it's very late for Erika, so I won't keep you on much too longer in New York time. Is that your copy, Damien? Is this your copy? I don't know. We got a few copies. All right. With that, everyone, I'm going to bid you adieu. Good night, Shea. Good night, Erika. And good night, everyone that tuned in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, before we go. Where can people find you on the social medias? I almost forgot.
You first, Shea.
Okay, yep. I'm on Instagram mostly, Twitter occasionally, but it's at Shea Ernshaw for both of those. So yep, that's where you can find me.
I am on Twitter usually. I'm at Erika Swyler, and I'm on Instagram occasionally at Sea City Sky.
Excellent. And with that, the real goodbye. Okay.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Good night.